So, York Campbell, host of Welcome to Earth Stories. Thank you for joining me on Podcast Junkies.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Pleasure being here, Harry. Thank you so much.
I always want to remind podcasters that there's no perfect environment, and we obviously had a couple of challenges getting things set up, and there's always something going on. I'm on a MacBook, so my something is working overtime because it's making a lot of noise. That fan will not turn off. So I just want to remind and give some comfort to podcasters who that are listening that we don't always get the best environments, and we just do the best we can with what we have at times.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sometimes it's a struggle. I totally get it.
Yeah. So we connected because I think you found our conversation with Tim O'Brien. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's
That's
right.
right.
Timothy Kim O'Brien.
And you've been working with Tim?
Educator.
Have you been
Yeah.
working with Tim previously?
Yeah. I mean, he's been on so many projects of mine on Welcome to Earth Stories. So yeah, he's a great guy. He has a really good knack for the whole podcasting field, and he's very creative. So I've been on his show on Create Art Podcast, and
Yeah.
he's been on my show, taking various parts in the stories that I've written.
So did you find my show because of his appearance and that he was promoting it?
Yeah, I've always known your show
Okay.
through the years. I've always known that you've been out there and I've listened to episodes.
Okay.
But it was Tim's involvement. He says, "Oh, you got to be on Harry's show." It was great. And so I listened to the interview that you had with him. And
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, okay." And so it was really because of his efforts that I'm here right now with you.
Yeah, and I think that's another reminder for podcasters. A lot of times it's word of mouth because when you're digging a show, when you find something that resonates with you, when you see a guest or you hear a conversation that you really connect with as a listener, I think you want to share it with as many people as possible so they can find it. And I think from a discovery perspective, that's one of the main things podcasters think about, like, how am I going to get people to find my show? How am I going to get people? And I think it's as simple as really sharing the ones that you enjoy, and then little by little, one listener at a time. That's how we grow our shows.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's all about the power of networking.
Yeah.
And I always like to say building a circle as well. Because when I started out on social media, I didn't know what I was doing. And sometimes you may think that, wow, this person has thousands of followers. That doesn't really matter anything.
Yeah.
You have to build a tight circle and forget about the thousands and just focus on the 10. And then when that 10 grows, focus on the 20.
Yeah.
Because you could just easily get lost.
How did you and Tim get connected?
Well, let me see. We got connected, I guess, I listened to his show, and I'm not sure if I called in or I was complimenting him on an episode. I think that's how it was.
Okay.
I think that's how it was. He was on Great Art Podcast.
Yeah.
And then I said, "Hey, way to go. Good show. I really like what you said." And then he invited me to be his guest.
Okay. Yeah, that's usually how it is. I'm always curious because I've heard this stat one time, and I think I'm going to start asking my guests if it's true, but I heard you probably can't maintain more than, I think 5 to 7 was the number of active shows that you listen to at any given point, just because of all the busy things we've got going on in our life. Do you find that that's the case for you?
I listen to more than that. I listen to too many podcasts.
Yeah.
It's filled of so many. So I listen to, let me see, maybe 12.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, but I have over 200.
Yeah, that's how the show got started. Yeah, for me, because when I remember looking at my phone, and I consider myself a podcast junkie because I was just binging them. This is when I discovered them in 2014. And then over time, some come, some go, some stay because they're friends and I want to check in. So I'm being more selective. And even for the ones that I do like, I'm a regular listener for, like Joe Rogan, for example. I'll selectively look at a guest and see if I recognize the topic or I recognize the guest's name. So now I'm being more selective, even with the shows that I love, not to listen to all the episodes of all the shows. I just don't have enough time, but just being more selective about what I choose to listen to. And obviously I'm listening at a little bit faster speed now.
The same thing with me. For myself, I was listening to a podcast it's a 3-hour long podcast. Sometimes it goes longer than that. And then I said, wait a second, I'm spending a lot of time listening to these two guys. And I made a decision not too long ago just to cut them out of my life, even though I still like them.
Interesting.
I'm missing out on everyone else. And so as soon as I cut them out, I was able to listen to other shows.
Yeah.
But, and then sometimes I have a guilty, I'm not sure about you, Harry, but sometimes there's certain shows that I like a lot, but then I stop listening to them and I feel guilty. I should be listening to these guys,
Yeah.
right? This is my favorite show. What am I doing? I'm not listening to them anymore. It's not because a show is not, sometimes we just outgrow particular shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we take a break and then we come back a few months or a year. Sometimes
Yeah.
that happens.
Or
Sometimes
never.
that happens. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I think for this particular show, I think I just simply outgrown it.
Yes. I think that's important
And,
too, because
and
I've seen,
now,
yeah. Yeah. I think it's important to understand that we do grow and we're maturing as people and our interests change. And so the things that I was interested in 2014 when I first discovered podcasts and I was listening to a ton of shows like Pat Flynn and a lot of other new podcasters. I was listening to Libsyn's podcast, every single one, because I was hosting with Libsyn and I wanted to learn about them. And that's how I discovered new guests. But over time, I think as I'm maturing, as I'm evolving, as I'm growing, I'm getting different interests and I'm expanding and I'm growing. For example, like spirituality is big for me. So just like all these things that are about like raising the consciousness of the planet, like I'm gravitating towards that stuff. And, it's nothing against anyone who I used to listen to in the past, but I really I value my time more now. And so I'll start listening to an episode and usually within the first couple of minutes, I'm just like, it doesn't really seem like it's not pulling me in, and I think I'm just being more discerning, which is really important.
for myself as well, just recently, I became a little bit more brutal when it comes to listening to a show. I'm very brutal because before I'll just let a show drain me for an hour for some kind of, because I feel loyal to the host or whatever that is. And so there goes my hour, there goes my 2 hours.
Yeah.
And what did I gain from that? I didn't grow. I didn't
Yeah.
grow my understanding of God or the universe or the people around me. And so now what I do, just like you, if I listen to a show and if I'm not in it, if I'm not getting it, even though I may like her, she may be my favorite, I just hit skip for now.
Yeah.
Just move on to somebody else.
So let's
And
rewind.
It's good. Yeah,
Go
it's
ahead.
good to be brutally honest with yourself.
Yeah. And it's a skill that you learn over time and you get better at because, like you said, there's only so much time in the day and we've all got regular lives going on. We've got families, we've got businesses, we've got other shows, we've got our own shows we've got to work on. And so that window gets smaller and smaller of time that I can listen to, and even opportunities too, because everyone's commute is drastically reduced a lot because of everything that happened post pandemic. So that whole experience has been shifted. And so I really find small pockets, whether I'm making breakfast or lunch, or maybe I'll go on a walk or, out walk the dog or just, it's really interesting how small the windows I have now available to listen to podcasts are. Sometimes in the evening, I'll sit and listen to one, but I think we're all becoming a bit more discerning. So it's almost like a call to podcasters to sort of, step up and make sure that the content you're creating is resonating, it's adding value, it's either educating, entertaining, or enlightening your audience.
Yeah, exactly. And we always need to give a little bit extra. We can never just call it in anymore
Yeah.
because people are selective and they could feel if you're not giving it your 100% and they'll just move on. And so if you're lackadaisical and if you feel that you just get on the microphone without editing, without having a proper plan in place, then just expect to have a very small amount of people listening to the show because people want information and people want to be entertained or amused or whatever it is. And so we have to provide that as podcasters. I think it's our mission.
So let's rewind the clock a little bit. Do you remember how you got started on the podcast path? Was it first as a listener and then eventually as a creator?
I was watching Smallville. Now, this is all the way back to Smallville.
Okay.
And so I was a big Smallville fan and I wanted to understand the behind the scenes. And so I stumbled onto the whole podcast things, looking at my computer. And then I think this was with iTunes at the time. And then I said, wow, there is a Smallville podcast? That's incredible. I heard about podcasting for a little bit, but this is my first time ever listening to a podcast. And it happened to be Smallville. And then I couldn't wait till after every episode to see what those two guys have to say. I said, oh, they're probably going to not like this episode. I'm going to run home to my computer, plug it in, and download the file or whatever to my MP3 and see exactly what they're thinking about the episodes. That's what drew me into it. Like, these guys are amazing. When Smallville was over, or just before, I said, there must be other people like these two. Then I started getting involved in technological podcast or tech show all about Apple, a big Apple thing. And so,
What year was this?
Apple. Oh, what year was Smallville on the air? Let me think. 2005, 2005, I think.
Okay.
Before 2000. Yeah, around there.
Yeah, that's early days, because the first podcasts were, I think, 2006. So it was like right at the same time, because it might have been that. So it was very early days, I think, even like, it's easy to find shows because there weren't a lot of podcasts back then.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's what got me hooked to podcasting. And I've been listening ever since.
And then when did you get the urge, or what was the impulse for you to start looking into starting one yourself?
For myself, I've been writing stories for a very long time, and hundreds of stories. And I've always thought of what I could do to contribute to podcasting. And that was strange because I have like tons of stories. And then my wife said to me, she says, hey, York, you have a lot of stories. What about if you just take the stories that you have and figure out how to make a podcast out of it? And the idea was easy. I just couldn't think of it. It was just really her just saying, just do this. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You have tons of stories here. So that's what I did. I took the stories that I had, hundreds, and figured out a way to craft it. That was very difficult because I didn't know what I was doing, didn't have the proper tools, no training whatsoever. I just had an iPhone with me and earbuds. And then I just started like that. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone starting out, but that's what I did. And so I created over 400 episodes at that, around that time. I had a daily show, which I don't recommend either.
That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Every single day I was on the microphone, including Saturdays and Sundays, every single day. Thank goodness for my wife that tapped me on the shoulder, and because she knows that I'm probably going to have a breakdown, she said, what about if you just do this twice a week? I forgot exactly what she said. I think she said twice a week. But I said, no, I have to do this every day. And she didn't have to do this every single day. You're not obligated. You need to slow down because you're going to drive yourself crazy. And she was right. I slowed down the production. I did every 2 days or every 2 days or every 3 days. And then I did it once a week.
Yeah.
Because you need to pace yourself.
And so when did you originally start the show?
I originally started the show in 2017. Before it was called Poetic Earthlings. And then,
okay.
And then I had the name change.
What made you change the name?
Well, for myself, the name Poetic Earthlings, it was a good name at the beginning because it fit what I was going to do, but it wasn't very specific. Some people hear Poetic Earthlings, they're not thinking of science fiction stories. They're thinking poetry, but that's not what the show is. And so over time, the name wasn't suiting exactly what I wanted to do. And I think I was losing potential listeners. And so I thought, well, what about Welcome to Earth Stories? It's a little bit plainer, more simple, but it gets a little bit to more of what I'm doing rather than Poetic Earthling. That was the name change.
For someone that's discovering the show for the first time or who's not familiar with your writing, how would you describe the premise of the show, the content, and who the show's for?
The show is for people that are trying to think in different ways about their purpose on Earth, to think in different ways about the labels that they're accustomed to, and they want a way to escape the norm. It's for people that are into science fiction, that are into tales, but grounded in reality as well. And so this will attract those type of people. The shows are, most of them are brief, but they're also sort of like a mini journal
Mm.
about my life and about other people, and ways that we could look at humanity in a different way, as I alluded to earlier, rather than all of these stigmas or all of these labels attached. We can look to people as earthlings rather than just the color of one's skin,
Yeah.
rather than just the title that they're using. So that was the idea.
So talk a little bit about the production process, how much time goes into each one of these, and how long they are, just for again, for folks that, getting them interested in the show, and talk a little bit about the work and the creative part that goes into creating these.
Well, it takes way too long. One of my episodes are normally about, on average, 15 to 20 minutes, but that one episode could take about 3 or 4 days to produce, from writing it, from the actual production, and also the different voice actors that I have all around the world. But normally what I do, just to start off with, I take out a pen and paper, or I go on my computer and I start typing. All right, that's the hardest part, to actually creating the story, not even the editing and the production level, but to sit down and to make a story from scratch. That's very difficult. Once I do that, then what I do is I don't work on the sound effects or the music. That comes second. So I work on the script itself. I try to make it as lively as possible. Sometimes there's some ad libs, because I don't like to read every single thing. All right, the stories itself, they are read because it is a fictional story, but there's parts of it where I'm just making things up on the spot. So I go through it a couple of times just to make sure that the flow is right. And then once it's done, once I lay out all of the script on the microphone, then I listen back to it and I figure out where the music could come in, where the other voices, the different actors could come in to make the material even stronger. So work on the sound design. And that takes quite a while to do, 5 hours, 7 hours, just to create that. And then I take everything, and if everything is good, the music, the little sound bites, everything, and then I blend it together. The parts that are hardest to do at times is to wait on files from other people. That's hard.
Yeah.
Right? So my friend in England, if she's working on hers, then I have to wait until she sends me the file, or a person from Trinidad that I was working with from Trinidad, I have to wait until she sends the file. And it's just a lot of waiting in between. But once it's all there, then I clean up their sound, because sometimes they may not be using the proper equipment. So I do have some processes in place that could clean up their sound, make sure that everything is balanced. And then that's where the magic starts, the blending process.
Where did you get the inspiration to put that much production work into these episodes?
I got the inspiration from listening to other shows such as Radiolab, This American Life, especially Radiolab, and the way for me, they're the gold standard of how to produce a show, how to make it entertaining, the sound effects, the music bed. So because before, when I started off, again, I didn't know what I was doing at all. I was inside of my closet with my phone.
Yeah.
And there was no sound effects, nothing. I was what they may have called a purist. I said, they don't need to hear any music. They just need to hear my voice. My voice will carry it through. But then I started listening to other stories, other people, and I said, well, it wouldn't hurt if I put in some sound effects, if I put in some different elements. Much later on, I also incorporated different voices as well into the show. So, yeah, that's sort of like the genesis to the show.
So everything started with the stories you were writing, which provided the impetus for you to start the show. So talk a little bit about your writing journey. Like, how did that start, and how far back does that go?
That goes far back, since I was about 10 or 11.
Okay.
I've been writing stories ever since then.
Yeah.
Very primitive writing, but ever since then I started writing. I put together a book as well, a published book called Universe Splendor, and in Quebec. I'm Canadian. I live in Ottawa, but so that book was published in Quebec. And then I wrote different articles for a local newspaper as well. So my writing journey has been throughout many years. And I've changed over time. As anyone, as a writer or entertainer, you change, you develop, and you learn new skills. But ever since I was knee-high, I was writing stories, particularly science fiction stories.
What's your inspiration? Where does your inspiration for science fiction come from?
Well, I like to say that it comes from some certain books that no one has ever heard before in movies that no one has ever, but I can't really say that.
Yeah.
I'm like everybody else, Star Trek and Star Wars.
Yeah.
I like to give a more, a more cerebral, more scholarly answer.
Yeah.
To say some strange guy up in the Appalachians that you've never heard of, but you've heard of these people. So Star Wars, those type of movies. That's what really turned me on to writing fiction. And also other authors such as Francine Rivers that does more historical fiction novels. People like those, people like Steinbeck.
Yeah.
Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah, the classics. So do you remember, did you gravitate towards taking classes when you were in high school or in college or on writing? Like, how did you begin to expand and improve that craft?
I expanded just by reading books. I didn't take a form. I took a course that was totally unrelated in college.
Yeah.
I was in law enforcement.
Okay.
Completely unrelated.
Interesting.
But I just started reading books. The teachers didn't tell me, you got to read 1984. But I read 1984. So certain classics I just picked up over time and read through them, watched movies based on books, and started growing from there. And that's pretty much how I started.
Do you feel like you were supported in that journey? Because a lot of times when you're first getting started, especially when you start writing at such a young age, if someone's not, continuing to help you keep that spark going for something that you're just learning for the first time, discovering this new world, being inspired by, sitting in a movie theater and being inspired by science fiction, and then taking all those passions together and trying to see what it is. It's almost like this creative energy is bubbling up inside you and you're trying to figure out where's the best, outlet for it.
Yeah, well, for myself, I didn't get the support when I was young from my family.
Yeah.
So I had to seek out support somewhere else. And within my circle of friends, we were just writing rap songs. I used to be part of different rap groups.
Okay.
And I was the lyricist. I wrote the songs for them.
Yeah.
But also on the side, I was writing stories, sci-fi stories and just different things. But that I didn't really get anyone saying, "Oh, way to go, York, keep on writing those stories." It was only my teacher at the time.
Okay.
And so what I'll do, she will give me an assignment. She'll say, "I'm going to give you an assignment, York. This is going to be the beginning of the story, and I want you to continue it."
Okay.
She was an incredible teacher.
What's her name?
I forgot her name. You know what? A couple of years ago, she's probably in her 80s or 90s now.
Yeah.
She reached out to me. I was so blown away.
Oh, wow.
On Facebook. I've never seen her since I was 11 years old.
Wow.
And she reached out to me and she says, "Oh, it's good, York, that you're still writing." And we just had that connection. I'm like,
that's amazing.
I was so moved because she's the one that when I wrote my stories, she typed it up like the old-fashioned typewriter, and then she'll correct things for me as well. And because of her, I'm writing even to this day because she encouraged me. She said, "Way to go." And probably it wasn't all that good, right? But she saw the potential in me. She says, "I know that there's something in you and you could do this." So she kept on giving me assignments, writing assignments. And then I wrote them. She typed them up on her old-fashioned typewriter.
Yeah.
And so that's how it got started. And now she was my motivation.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. We think about when we're that young, how impressionable specific teachers are, especially if they see potential in you and they know how to nurture it. And, so many people have talked about how, teachers are one of those professions that so underappreciated, so underpaid. When you think about their ability to have a direct impact on a child's life and a child's future and where that child will go, and nurturing talent. And, as she did, like egging you on to saying, yes, I see something in you. I see something in you. Keep at it. There's formative years where, you know, if there's no one there to support you and you don't know whether you're doing it right or wrong, you sort of lose your way. I remember a story I may have told previously on the show where I was trying to learn drums, and the teacher was like, I think annoyed by the way I was doing it, and he picked up my drumsticks, and he was showing me, but there would happen to be a knot in my drumstick, and he broke my drumstick.
Oh.
And I was like devastated. I think for some reason I never got a new pair, and I never continued learning the drums. It was so wild, but it was just very impressionable. So it's very interesting, a certain age range where if you don't feel like you're supported, or you don't have the right teacher, or a teacher with patience, you can just lose that focus and lose that drive. And I've always appreciated, and I think I've always had an ear for rhythm, and that's why I gravitated towards DJing, and I learned how to DJ on vinyl and turntables in the 80s. I'm sorry, late 80s. But it's interesting. The fact that I'm still talking about it now, I'm 52, and I'm still talking about something that happened when I was a kid. It was just like, a kind of a shock to me and that's an example of not being supported. So the flip side is, I do remember we would be given 20 words. I think this might have been probably third or fourth grade, and we would see the 20 words, and the assignment was to write one sentence with each word. But for some reason, I saw the 20 words and I was like, well, why don't I put the whole 20 into a story? And so I would, figure out a way to take the 20 words, and I would craft a story. And I remember, as I'm now waking up to doing more writing more as an adult, I remember that experience of how much fun I had playing with words and just piecing them together. And so, I imagine that's a similar experience that you had as well.
It is a similar experience. And hey, look at you. We're getting up the hill together around pretty much the same age. But yeah, that's amazing when you could have a coach on your side that will support you. Now, an unrelated story, unrelated to podcasting, but similar to what you said. There is a friend of mine, and much older, and we were in the same church together. He's a handyman. I'm not a handyman whatsoever.
Yeah.
I'm far from being a handyman. All right. And so he paints homes. And he's a guy, I'm not sure, I think I kind of looked up to him. And he says, hey, York, you want to go work with me? And I said, me? He said, sure. And this guy was a cool guy and everything. So I have no painting experience. And so I was trying to hold the brush in the right hand. Then as I was painting on the wall, he turned to me almost like he had the devil in his eyes. And then he just shouted. And I was very young. I was very impressionable. This guy's an older guy, right? He's a man's man, like a real man that could do stuff. I'm a guy that just knows Star Trek and Star Wars, but he's a man's man.
Yeah.
And I kind of looked up to him. And then when he shouted at me and he says, you're doing it wrong. What are you doing? I froze. All my confidence was gone. I was shaking with the paintbrush, with the paint dripping on the ground. And I felt like I just couldn't do anything. And those 4 hours was torment because everything that I was doing was wrong. And that broke me. And ever since then, I don't think I really didn't want to paint. I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
It was just that one experience.
Yeah.
And things like that, if you have the wrong coach, if you have somebody that's kind of toxic or dangerous in your life, and you feel that you can't do anything right, that stays with you. I'm almost 52 years old, and I'm still remembering that time.
Yeah, it's so important. Those formative years, as they're called. You're so impressionable, and you're looking up to people in the same way you looked up to this gentleman, and you admired him because he was a man's man, or was a handyman, and things that you wanted to possibly learn. And maybe he was never taught on how to be a teacher. That's why it's almost so important to remember the skill that goes into being a good teacher, because not even the teachers that are teachers that sign up to be teachers, they're not, just because they sign up to be teachers doesn't mean they're good teachers, and so there's this unique combination of people who want to teach and who have the ability to teach, because you have to have a skill set to teach a specific topic, right? You have to put thoughts together, break them up into modules so people can easily digest them, But then and then as we've both alluded to, you have to have patience. You have to be patient, and especially when you're working with students, kids, anyone who's learning something for the first time, they're gonna mess up. You have to know that they're gonna mess up, and it's all these kind of Venn diagrams of all these things that have to come together in a perfect way, so that the student and the teacher are the right mix, and it lights that spark, and then the teacher sees it and they fan that flame, and then so when it happens, it's really magical.
Yeah. And I have a child. Do you have children, Harry?
No, no children yet.
Okay. I have a son, and I'm teaching him to do certain things in the kitchen. I'm no chef. My wife cooks. All right. I just kind of make stuff up as I go along.
Yeah.
But it requires a lot of patience, even to teach our children how to crack an egg, right? And sometimes when he's doing things, I don't want things to break in the kitchen. I don't want things to go wrong. But now I'm learning, okay, I need to let go. And if things mess up, then that's all right. What's the worst that could happen? All right.
Yeah.
He makes a mess. That's okay. We'll clean it up. Something spills. That's okay. And so as teachers, or people that wants to be teachers, we have to allow people in our lives to mess up,
Yes.
to make
And, yeah. And also seeing the world through a child's eyes.
Yeah.
And understanding when you're like a child, everything is bigger than life. Adults are bigger than life. You look up to people a lot, and, you'll come to find out when you live long enough that you get disappointed a lot. So, but just remembering that kids, as they're learning the world, as they're discovering, to your point, they obviously their parents are a big help with that, but also just remembering that they have a lot of trust in humans. They have a lot of trust in adults, and a lot of times, adults let them down, and they carry this with the rest of, throughout their lives. So, hopefully as the world starts to awaken and become more conscious of the impact we're having, the long-term impact we have in our connections with kids, in their formative years, I think hopefully people will become more patient and, guide kids down the right path.
Yeah, I hope so too. We need that.
Yeah, exactly. Talk to me a little bit about your hip hop influences, because I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, because I grew up in New York, and just outside in Yonkers, New York, and I've lived in New York City, but I was there, sort of like front stage watching the birth of hip hop, birth of house music for myself personally. So it was really fun times. I'm wondering what some of your early influences were.
Oh, yeah, I was there from the beginning as well.
Yeah.
From Curtis Blow.
Yeah. Wow.
Grandmaster Flash, Houdini.
Yeah.
One of my biggest influences of all time, it was Run DMC.
Yeah.
And so probably a close second is Cool J. The early
LL Cool J. Yep. Yep.
So yeah, I was there from way back then. I remember my older brother, he got me into hip hop music because I was just into, I don't even know what I was into. Just rock and roll music.
Yeah.
Just Corey Hart. I don't know. The Police.
Yeah.
Queen. Air Supply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just those rock and roll groups. And I didn't know a thing about hip hop. And then my brother went to the States, and he got the hip hop gene, and he brought it. He took the plane, and then he brought it back. And then he said, "York, man, I heard something. You got to listen to this."
Yeah.
Put a record on or a cassette on.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? I never heard anything like that before. Because I was into my rolling
80s pop. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever I was into.
Yeah.
And I said, these guys are amazing. And then I started listening to some more, and I started doing freestyle. Back in the day, we used to call it battle raps. So I was battle rapping people at school, different places. And so that was really fun. And so that was the early beginnings.
Yeah.
And then I started taking it a little bit more seriously. I started putting together a rap group, writing material. We went as far as to recording studios. We got some stuff played on the radio as well. And that was fun. I wasn't sure how far we were going to take it. There's a lot of different things that happened back then. The group got too big, like way too big. There were like 9 of us in a group.
Oh, that's funny. You were the original Wu-Tang Clan then.
Yeah, that's right. The original Wu-Tang Clan. That's right.
That's funny.
And it just got too big. And then sometimes if you're not careful with friendships and money, those and a potential record deal,
Yeah.
it could go south really fast.
Gets tricky.
It does, because somebody took notice of us, somebody that's way more into the music business than we all were.
Mm-hmm.
And then this person was kind of floating around the idea of money. He says, well, whoever writes the songs, because I wrote the songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
Yeah.
says, whoever writes the songs will get more of the money. And some people didn't feel good about that. And I was young. I was like 16 years old.
Yeah.
What do I know? I just enjoyed rapping.
Yeah.
I wasn't really in it to make money, but some people in the group, they felt funny that I was going to make more money than them. Right? So things just went really downhill pretty much after that.
What was the name of the group?
I had different groups. I had Two Hype Prophecy.
Okay.
And then I had Def Effect.
Okay.
So there's Def Effect. That was just myself. Oh, Two Hype Prophecy. That was with myself and a buddy of mine, just two of us.
Yeah.
His name, Two Prophecy. And then there was Def Effect. And that became like the big 9 people in the group.
Okay.
So that became the monster group.
Very interesting. Is any of that music still available to listen to?
I have copies of it.
Yeah.
Such a long time. It's not a rotation. You're not going to hear it on the radio.
It's not on Spotify?
It's not on Spotify.
Yeah.
This is way before Spotify existed.
If you ever get it online or if you put it on YouTube or anything like that, send us the link so we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah. It's an interesting time because, they're like when you think about lyricists and rapper, I mean, specifically the people who are writing the lyrics, the people who write it have a specific skill set because, it takes a lot of work to kind of put those ideas together. And I'm sure that was helpful for you later on in life. And then the people who can freestyle, you just play like a good beat for them. And then off the top of their head, they can just kind of like put thoughts together, thinking far ahead. Because if you do it well, you're thinking about these complex thoughts, and then they have to rhyme, they have to sound together, they have to be in rhythm. And it's just like, they're like them. I've heard of one of my friends, compare them to like modern day Shakespeare, with some of the ones who are the best at it. And I've been watching some of these new cats coming up, and some of these freestyle videos, and I'm just like, whoa, it still gives me chills. Like when I hear like a good group or a good like freestyle artist just rap all over, ad hoc over a beat. It's a unique skill set.
It is a unique skill set. I was on Clubhouse the other day ago. By the way, Clubhouse is still around.
Is it?
It still exists. I was there. I saw it, even though no one's talking about Clubhouse.
Yeah.
But so I go on Clubhouse, and sometimes I go into the freestyle rap sessions.
Okay.
And so people are dropping a beat and passing around the microphone, virtually speaking. And then I come on. This
nice.
old man. This old man comes on.
Well, they don't know your age, so.
Yeah, they don't. There's a still picture of me, but they don't know my age. But there's these younger guys, and I'm doing my little raps.
Yeah.
But it's cool because I'm listening to them, and it helps me to grow. Not because I want to be the next Drake or anything.
Yeah.
But it helps me to grow in my stage performance. It helps me even in writing stories, in the podcast, to thinking really quickly.
On your feet, yep.
On my feet, that's what I wanted to say, on my feet.
Yeah.
And so they help me, these young guys that are rapping on Clubhouse. And so
very interesting.
There's different skills that we could put into place and to help us in our careers and to help us in being a better podcaster.
Send me that link to Clubhouse. I haven't been to Clubhouse probably in about a year. It was obviously big post-COVID and I was jumping on, but I always thought it was an interesting space for freestyle. And I think I jumped on a couple of those early ons because I think the format of it lends itself well to that kind of like freestyling and with people from all around the world. So I'd love, if I can find the time and if it matches up with my availability, I'll definitely jump in. Yeah. And depending where I'm at, I may try to jump in with a rhyme or two as well.
Yeah, it does. Sure. It helps. And sometimes I'm in rooms it's all poetry room. So
okay.
Sometimes I do freestyle. I'm known on Clubhouse as a freestyle poet.
Okay.
So they give me a topic. They give me anything and they just throw something out. And then I just make a story on the spot or a poem on the spot.
Okay. Is it Poetic Earthling on Clubhouse as well?
Yeah. And now I changed the name to Welcome to Earth Stories on Clubhouse.
Okay. Okay. All right. We'll check this out. So, a couple of questions as we wrap up. Thanks for sharing your very interesting story, your background. I think it's super inspiring to hear about all the different ways and all the things that have inspired you to get to this point. And, a lot of times regular listeners will just know you as the podcast host, but they don't understand like all these things that have, been an important part of your life and have like shaped you and given you this inspiration and then provide you with this unique voice and this unique background and life experiences to get you here. And that's really what colors and enhances, what you're providing on the podcast as well. So I appreciate you sharing all that. What's something you've changed your mind about recently?
Well, recently, when I was working on my episodes, it came to a point where I said that what I'm doing is not just putting out MP3 files, but
Hmm.
creating art.
Yeah.
Now, this may sound kind of lofty, but I had to take a look at it. And I said, well, that is true. Because the things that I'm doing on my show is an art form that goes in with it. And once I started to see that, it changed everything. It was like a light switch, like a spiritual light switch
Yeah.
to say that what you're doing is more than just creating files, moving things around, cutting, pasting, and editing, whatever it is. But you're creating something that you can even pass down to your son. When he gets older, he can listen to his dad from way back then. It's something that you're giving to other people. You're giving it, I'm giving my talents away for other people to hear, to listen, so that they will be inspired to grow in their walk with God, or to see the universe in a better way, or to help their fellow brothers and sisters, meaning earthlings, so that they could treat each other better. So that's something that was a mind change. And I'm grateful for the mind change, because now when I go into the studio, when I produce the things that I'm producing, it's for a more noble purpose.
Yeah. I love that. I think a lot of what we're seeing now is especially with people who are in the podcasting space, is this archival quality and this archival aspect to what we're creating. Obviously, as a child of the 80s, we still have some stuff on cassette deck or VHS tapes and that we've got to go hunt through. And I'm sure, people have been doing that and going through their parents' archival footage and stuff. But I think they're more readily accessible now with podcasts because basically, we're leaving this trail for the future generations and possibly for folks in our family as well to have those memories. And, obviously it's memories that anyone can listen to, but there's something there about being able to hear, like, if it's going to be like your siblings or your parents or your father or your mother, like who's recorded podcasts from years ago. And there's something interesting about, leaving that behind for future generations.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there is. There is something wonderful about it.
Yeah, I love it a lot. What is the most misunderstood thing about you?
I think the most misunderstood, and this always bothers me, even to today, this always bothers me when I go to work and when I'm out with people, they say, oh my goodness, York, you could actually smile and tell a joke. That, like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yes. I'm not
Yeah.
always serious. I don't always just talk
Yeah.
about theology or other deep things. I could have fun. And my son the other day ago, or today, he says, oh my goodness, Dad, you actually laughed at one of my jokes. And then sometimes he says, Dad, you're actually having fun.
Mm.
I'm having fun. I'm a human
Yeah.
being. Dad, and have
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yes, I could talk about deep things and what's going on around the globe
Yeah.
and metaphysical things or whatever. But I could also watch Seinfeld and laugh at Seinfeld.
Yeah.
I think people think that I'm trapped inside of a library and I'm just reading books and I'm not listening to hip hop because I'm too good to listen to it. And I'm just listening to classical music as I'm reading quotations from generations ago. And that's all that I do. So that's the misconception. So,
Well, hopefully you can play them this episode when it goes live and they'll learn a little bit more about you.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, York, I appreciate you reaching out. I appreciate you being a listener of the show. As a podcast host yourself, I'm sure you can relate to the fact of, looking out and for every opportunity to see who's listening to the show, where they're listening from, how they found the show. So I definitely appreciate the time you've put into listening to the, the episodes that you've listened to of my show. I really am excited to share your story. I think it's really inspiring, and I think more and more people will learn about what you're doing through this episode, which I'm glad about. So I'm just really appreciative of you spending the time and talking a little bit about your inspiration, because it'll inspire someone who may have an idea for a podcast, and they may not have your lived experience, but I think what's interesting is all these little things that have happened in our lives and how they've made us and formed us into these human beings. And I think, to your point, like, we're all on this planet together, and I really have been talking about this a lot in my writing. I'm on Threads now, and I'm talking about this on Threads because I love it, that it's a writing platform, that we're all on this journey to share our stories, the good, the bad, the pretty and the ugly, because it's not all Instagram moments, and we need to show them because there's someone watching, there's someone listening, there's someone reading that is going to feel like, oh, that's exactly like I'm going through that. And that's something that I experienced, or that's something that happened to me. And, it's helpful, and just kind of tying this all back to like your Earth stories, that we're all going through this journey together. And, and the more we can share these stories with people, the more they'll inspire them to do good things with them.
Yeah, right there, Harry. You said it all. That is absolutely true. And we need to show people our authentic self, our real selves, rather than the Instagram moments, rather than all of this facade, and just to break through. And sometimes that's hard. My stories, sometimes I expose myself, metaphorically speaking, within my stories. I want to touch people. I want to communicate, not just the good, but also the struggle.
Yeah, real.
Because that's what connects us all.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate your time, York. The website is welcometoearthstories.com. Anywhere else you want to send folks to connect with you?
The main website, welcometoearthstories.com, that could connect you to my Twitter account. And stay tuned. There is a spin-off show coming out very soon, and that's Experimental Stories.
Okay, that'll be interesting. And so when you publish that, give us a heads up, and we'll share it on our socials as well. Thanks again for your time, York. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Harry, you're an amazing Earthling. Thank you so very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.